A warm welcome to our viewers in Nigeria and around the world. This is Politics on Sunday. We're reaching you live from TVC News Studio in Abuja, the federal capital. I am Femi Akonde. Well, Nigeria might get new electoral laws that will form the legal framework for the conduct of the 2027 general election. But that will only happen if the National Assembly is able to wrap up the amendments to the bill and pass it, hoping it gets the assent of President Bola Tinubu this year. There are ambitious proposals made by INEC and other advocacy groups seeking electoral reforms. One key demand is strengthening INEC's independence and professionalism. There are calls to strip the president of the powers to appoint the national chairman of INEC, national commissioners, and resident electoral commissioners. But the ultimate aim here is to restore public confidence in the electoral process and ensure the outcome of the election is seen to be credible, free, and fair. Joining me live in the studio is the Director General, Center for Credible Leadership and Citizens Awareness, Dr. Gabriel Wambu. He will help us get a deeper insight into these proposed reforms and how it will define the future of elections in Nigeria. Welcome to the program, sir.
Good evening, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, expectations are already very high, following the recent proposals made by INEC to the country's to rejigging the country's electoral laws. We're also seeing moves in the National Assembly. So, and some people are saying, come on, we just had an election, a new electoral law in 2022, and this 2025, we are already calling for new laws. Shouldn't it be about strengthening the old laws, because we haven't explored that 2022 electoral as well enough?
Yeah, thank you so much. You see, basically, what INEC has done is consistent to the provisions of the Constitution of Nigeria, 1999, as amended. First of all, you have Section 228, you have Section 160. These two sections of the Constitution, empowers INEC to review, and make proposals, enact some administrative laws, to ensure that these elections are in tandem with the time. Now, there are certain sections of the proposals for which INEC has made. INEC has proposed about 142 main proposals. There are certain sections of the proposal that is purely administrative, that requires administrative action. About 86 of them requires administrative action by INEC, which is very simple. 48 of them, requires collaboration with security agencies, civil societies, stakeholders, major collaboration. And 8 of them really requires, legislative actions by the National Assembly. INEC on its own cannot enact laws, for instance, that would be binding. Those ones has to do with changing some sections that are enshrined in the Constitution of
just like the proposal to strip the president of the powers to appoint the chairman, national commissioners, and resident electoral commissioners.
Correct.
But well, some people are saying that stripping the president of this, we also know that it's helping INEC assert its independence. But do we really trust the capacity of INEC to be able to look within itself, or who will be saddled with that responsibility now? Is it INEC, or a separate body will now be formed to pick who becomes the INEC chairman, the national commissioners, and resident electoral commissioners?
Now, you see, appointment of INEC's chairman and commissioners, as it were, has to do with what INEC seeks, really, is to be saddled with that true responsibility of independence, to be unbundled, to be, retrieved completely from the clutches of political parties or political affiliations. Okay. So that the president, for instance, will not have any influence on INEC. so that that name independent will really count in the real sense of it. That is what INEC is trying to do. But in trying to do that, INEC cannot do that in isolation. And majority of the proposals here that are very serious, that will impact on the electoral credibility itself, will be done in tandem with the National Assembly. The National Assembly is expected, to do the requisite amendments, of the law. And of course, it requires the presidential assent. So some of us will rather opine that in the same manner, the National Assembly, tackles issues that have to do with national budgets. They work in day and night. They treat it, as serious as it were. The same manner and the same vigor should be used to do this, because this will restore the credibility of the electoral process the more. This will, endanger or bring in trust. Nigerians or the electorate will be able to trust in the electoral system very well. The problem we have is the process of these elections. Once this process is achieved, we're going to do away with a lot of things. Litigation will be reduced. People you see the voter turnout will increase massively, because people will now believe that manipulations and undue influence is limited to the barest minimum.
And then, INEC, before the last election, introduced or brought some innovations, especially the use of technology, the electronic transmission of results. But Nigerians were sad to find out that these procedural and technological innovations introduced by INEC lacked statutory backing, because the Supreme Court ruled that the Commission is not legally required to electronically transmit results. Hoping that this time around, with these new reforms coming up, what should we expect?
Now, and that is why one of the areas INEC is making proposals, is the area of transmission of results, election results, versus the manual collation of results. You understand? In a manner that they are seeking for proper legal interpretation. It has to be entrenched and be written in the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, so that the ambiguity associated with it, the interpretations by various courts, they differ in their interpretation, would be firm. Once this is entrenched in our Constitution, I think it will bring a lot of credibility, it will bring a lot of trust, because the way we got it wrong is that process of transmission. Sometimes the network could be bad. Sometimes there could be system defaults. Sometimes there could be... So there are a lot of intrigues, associated with this transmission of election results. Moreover, there are also issues when you have to do with manual collation, because you cannot rule out human error. You cannot rule out, undue influence and one or two things going wrong, So what INEC is doing right now is clear. INEC is interested in unfolding to the Nigerian populace, the Nigerian electorates, a very, very transparent, free, fair, and possibly credible election.
Yeah, these proposals by INEC, as noble as some of them appears, there are also concerns about some of these proposals, particularly the one by INEC that its powers to review election results under Section 65 of the Electoral Act 2022 should be limited to instances of declaration by duress. People are concerned about this, that INEC can only review its results or be called to review its result when the returning officer says that his or these results were done under duress, not mandatory declaration. People are saying that's a concern.
Yeah. You see, there is, for me, there is a lacuna in that aspect of, amendment. Probably as time goes on, we're going to get more clarity, as it were. But for us in the civil society, we would rather believe we would give more room for a review of election results, because we know that a lot of factors come into play when it comes to election results. You know, any returning officer that has declared a result, after the statutory period of review, INEC on its own cannot even change that result anymore. INEC cannot, after the statutory period, cannot upturn the result so declared by a returning officer. Only a court of competent jurisdiction can do that. Okay? So, and that is why Nigerians are concerned about this Section 65, as it were, of the Electoral Act, you know, so that we will now know what it takes, you know, to review election results, because contention must continue. So we want to limit it as much as possible and enshrine it in our constitution.
And they also proposing that in all of these contentions, election disputes and everything should be resolved within a time frame before the swearing in of the elected officers. Now, is it that is the problem with INEC setting that timeline in their proposal, or the judiciary ensuring speedy adjudication within a particular period of time?
And that is why INEC has proposed the unbundling of INEC, that there should be a commission that is in charge of electoral offenses and election disputes. There should be a body, you know, that is statutorily, you know, empowered to do so, so that they would unbundle. You know, it's so cumbersome going by the staff strength, you know, of the commission. If there are separate bodies that handle issues that affect political parties and electoral offenses and disputes, you know, it clearly defines a major role, clearly the role of INEC. And it also helps us to ensure that INEC does not meddle with, you know, other issues. Their concern, as it were, will be to conduct a transparent, free, fair, and credible election for Nigeria.
But won't it still jack up the cost of conducting elections in Nigeria? Because that's also another concern. You know, we keep spending more and more to conduct elections. And now there are also proposals for diaspora voting, early voting, and even people who are on essential duty as security officials, civil society observers, and all of that. And this will cost more.
Yeah, it's going to cost more, but that will bring in, it might not cost as much as we think if we bring in, you know, that is ability to vote without physically being there. If the proposition of downloading the system where your biometrics will be, that is downloading the proper app where your biometrics are, and you're able to vote electronically, that would entirely reduce the cost to the barest minimum. Cost of printing of PVCs, cost of printing different ballot papers, you know, even when some of the candidates might not be having the requisite number, they don't even have offices in every state of the nation and all that. So, you see, what that proposition is trying to fix is to actually reduce the cost of elections, running elections, given the dwindling, you know, budgetary allocation to INEC.
And there has been also a decline in participation, citizens' participation in the electoral process. We have seen several reforms expected to restore the confidence of the citizens in the electoral process, including that of 2022. But it seems that decline has been on. It's a steady decline. Are we hoping that this time around, with these reforms now proposed, that this would in a way restore that confidence and ensure that the participation and turnout on election day is raised?
No, you see, voter apathy is something that is so serious, you know, as it were. If you look at the presidential election in Nigeria, in 2023 presidential election, you know, the voter turnout was massive, you know, compared to when it had to do with the governorship and state assembly elections. Now, what does it show? It shows that over the period, that short period, because of some issues that had to do, that transpired, during the presidential elections, people were losing confidence in the electoral system. And that is why people felt, okay, there's no need, I'll just better stay at home since what I did, I voted the other time, I didn't really see the impact. But once we get it right in our reforms, these things will rejig naturally. People's interest in the electoral process will improve. We wouldn't have anything like voter apathy anymore.
But are you not seeing also a mindset where people are more concerned or interested in who becomes president than in who becomes a senator, a member of House of Representatives, or their representatives in the parliament, and indeed their governors? Because you said that, the turnout was more for the presidential election compared to state governors and others.
You see, the last presidential election, the interest of Nigerians, even in the diaspora, a lot of people had to come back to Nigeria to be able to vote, since you cannot vote electronically abroad. So a lot of people came back, to participate in the electoral process. And I must tell you, most of them had a mixed feeling. There are people that felt the system is okay. There are also a school of thought that also felt that the process was not credible. That is from their own perspective. But generally, once an electoral process is firm, once an electoral process is not just is seen to be transparent by the citizenry, by the electorate, boom, the voter participation, the voter engagement and all that would shoot up naturally.
Yeah, but we're yet to see diaspora voting. We're yet to see that suggestion of a proper framework. How will they vote? Will it be electronically? Will polling booths be set up at embassies across different places where there are Nigerians? What's that framework going to look like? That's yet to be clearly explained.
Yeah, for now, it is based on this proposition by INEC. For now, it is still vague. Okay? If people will sit in the comforts of their rooms, on their homes, and just one or two touches, they print and tap, and it is done, and they have voted, that would be a very good one. But if they have to also set up, if INEC has to set up voting cubicles in the embassies and all that, So right now, INEC has not, it is after these reforms, after it has been assented, it has been passed into law, that INEC will now give us clarity on whether it's going to set up, at the embassies, voting points and polling units at the embassies, or whether it will be electronically done. But for us now, I think for an election to be purely electronically done without the manual collation going side by side might give us a lot of issues, because you cannot trust the electronic processes 100%. We saw what's happened during the presidential election. The server and all that.
So that means we do not see 100% implementation of these reforms, even if they are passed and signed by the president. You do not expect 100% implementation of them in 2027.
No, it depends. Is Nigeria ready? We have off and on of power all the time. Is Nigeria really ready? It's not about the president, it's not about the National Assembly, it's not even about INEC. The service providers are there in those state governorship elections. You go to some places, you find out that all the service providers for which they use the beavers, you find out that there are no networks. What do you do in such instances? So these are issues. Is the Nigerian state, Nigerian nation, is it ready for an electronic system of voting? There are a lot of issues that have to be sorted out before we now mature towards, electronic voting. Electronic voting cannot just come. Otherwise, it will lead Nigeria into chaos, very serious chaos.
All right, then. Thank you so much, Dr. Gabriel Uwambu. A fine place to live in, and thank you so much for your contribution on the program. Well, that's all on politics on Sunday. You can watch a repeat of this episode at 11 p.m. and you can also see this episode again on TVC News YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching. I am Femi Akonde.